Thank you, Mr Bone, and it is a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship for this, what I consider a very, very important debate for my constituency. It is a truth well known that cities like London attract people looking for opportunities for education, culture, work and a vibrant community. In London, we are blessed with a huge volume of spaces to do that. However, the way public spaces are used and experienced in our capital differs for women and men. As the local Member of Parliament, one thing is clear to me: women have the right to use space in the same way as men and should feel safe in doing so. Since the devastating murders of Sarah Everard and Sabina Nessa, many people have contacted me to highlight concerns about women and girls' safety on our streets. And for a multitude of reasons, their deaths have come a watershed moment. Women understood the vulnerability of walking home alone at night. The government has made incredible strides in recent years on this issue, and I commend the Home Office ministerial team for their work. And I note in particular the government's strategy on tackling violence against women and girls. And I know the Minister's work that she did in the Department of Transport on this area, and I pay respect for that as well. Brilliant work. Violence against women and girls strategy is a significant step in the right direction, but there is still an enormous piece of work to do around making sure our cities, and in particular our capital city, leaves no stone unturned in ensuring the safety of women and girls on our streets. In recent years, a great emphasis has been placed on ensuring modes of public and private hire transport meet standards of safety, so that passengers can move around our capital with a sense of security. For women in particular, I know this is of great relief. It is therefore of huge concern to me that we still have unregulated private hire vehicles in London. Here I speak about the particular issue of unlicensed pedicabs. Of course, yeah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have on your chairmanship. Just on that point, would my honourable friend agree that any private hire vehicle, including pedicabs, should be regulated and licensed?
I thank the honourable member for her intervention, and I absolutely agree. And I know from her own constituency in Vauxhall that her local authority, Lambeth, also agrees with both of us that pedicabs should be regulated. But anyone who has come to central London has seen, and most likely probably heard, pedicabs. They are loud, they often block roads, and many intimidate and harass London visitors, particularly women. Currently, they are the only form of public transport in the capital that is unregulated. Due to a legal loophole, Transport for London is unable to regulate pedicabs, meaning neither drivers nor vehicles are licensed. Now, I know that there are pedicab firms that undertake their own voluntary vehicle and driver checks and have the right insurance. And I've met them and I've worked with the Pedicab Drivers Association, and I fully support those pedicab companies who want to do the right thing. However, as noted in the official impact assessment of the Pedicabs London Bill, there are still too many rogue pedicab drivers that do nothing to ensure they and their vehicles are safe or have any insurance. And they do so, at the moment, without any legal repercussions. This is a particular issue around the West End in my constituency, with its major theatres, nightlife venues, tourist locations, and the back streets of Soho and Covent Garden, which are so vibrant. Every day, I see and hear the impact on local people, local businesses and visitors caused by rogue pedicab drivers. Touting can be extremely aggressive, with amplified music and shouting throughout the night and into the early hours. As Amanda Jane, a Soho resident, said to me only last night, when you have your children woken up at midnight by these things, it's incredibly stressful and upsetting. Mr. Chairman, the police, local councils and Transport for London all need to be able to monitor these vehicles to ensure their passengers are safe. And in truth, and I do not say this lightly, we are living on borrowed time. I really do worry for the safety of passengers, and particularly women and girls, who are experiencing repeated antisocial behaviour from rogue drivers. Speaking with local authorities, I note that the 2014 Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act has proven somewhat useful power for councils like Westminster City Council to use in reducing the antisocial behaviour related to pedicabs. However, this is only a short-term measure which requires huge amounts of evidence, time and resources. And believe me, local authorities do not have the finances to spend on doing this, when by just closing a simple loophole would give them the powers that they needed on regulation. In fact, the turnover of riders and the locations they use mean it's very, very rare that a case is brought to court. These pedicab drivers are a transient population. As soon as they know that they are in trouble with the police or local authority, they disappear. So it's kind of, useless for local authorities to use. And still, local people and businesses have got to put up with this. So, the patchwork of issues can be traced back to the fact that pedicabs are currently defined as stage carriage under the Metropolitan Public Carriage Act of 1869 in Greater London, and thus do not fall under TfL's licensing powers. And I would say to the Minister again, we are in the 21st century and are having to deal with 19th century legislation. Surely, for the sake of the safety of women and girls, it is time to modernise the legislation surrounding pedicabs. And I do find this so frustrating, and that we really do need to ensure that within our capital city, pedicabs are actually regarded as hackney carriage and thus subject to regulation. In every other city in England, they are considered hackney carriages and can be regulated. And I do think there is an issue here where we don't see them in particular major other large cities. I can't recall seeing them in Manchester recently. They may be there, but they're not as prevalent as they are in central London. And there's probably a reason for that, because the pedicab operators know, the rogue ones know, they're not regulated and they can get away with dreadful... Of course.
Associations support the use of the National Register of Licence Revocations and Refusals for pedicab licensing. Does she feel that this would actually provide the safety checks to reassure women that people driving those cabs have had the adequate checks?
The honourable member is absolutely right. The more checks that we can have on drivers, we don't know who these drivers are most of the time. I have evidence, so much evidence in my office that I've collated over the last couple of years, where drivers have been known to be wanted by the police, not just in the UK, but overseas. And we are allowing women to get into vehicles with drivers who have not been DBS checked. I find it incredible. I'm sure the Minister appreciates that this loophole does invite a whole host of issues, not least about safeguarding of passengers, of all passengers, not just women, but all passengers. All other private hire vehicles, including our iconic black cabs, have to satisfy a whole range of licensing requirements in order to protect passengers. And, Mr Chairman, I have no doubt, like me, when you have had the benefit of a black cab driver's views on pedicabs, like I have many times, They are frustrated that it is not the same for them as it is for pedicabs. They are at a traffic light with a pedicab, and they have to jump through hoops where the pedicab doesn't. And I have to say that I do thank the brilliant black cab drivers, and I think our nation thanks a particular taxi driver in Liverpool on Sunday morning, and we do owe them the ability to have a fair scheme for all private hire vehicles. But unlike getting into an Uber, private hire vehicle or black cab, you have no way of knowing where you are going or who you are getting into the vehicle with. In London, pedicabs are able to operate with impunity, which leads to conflict and inconsistent position with licensed private hires. And we must move to a transparent safety and movement regulated system. Transparency for me is key. Indeed, for me, the perception of safety is just as important as the licence transparency scheme itself. As it stands, there is no accountability for any incident and that's what concerns me. As a woman, that concerns me. As the mother of a young woman, that concerns me. It speaks to a culture of some pedicab operators being able to get away with unacceptable behaviour and unsafe vehicles which are encouraged by an absence of a licence regime, and it's unfair on those pedicab operators who do the right thing. On a related point, due to the lack of regulation, there's also very few powers that the police can actually enforce with regard to rogue pedicabs. For instance, law enforcement has no powers in relation to lack of insurance, lack of training for riders or pedicabs that aren't fit for the purpose of carrying passengers. This means that even if a police officer saw a wholly unfit pedicab, they could do very little to prevent its plying its hire in central London or across the capital. I often walk around my constituency and I'm always shocked, frustrated, appalled by the behaviour of many pedicab drivers I see touting for business. And we really do need to end this practice. The police can enforce the cycle construction and the use and lighting regulations, but even these are unclear with regard to pedicabs or indeed other 3- or 4-wheeled cargo or work bikes. As noted in the conclusions of TfL's pedicab safety evaluation, as they are not referred to specifically in such regulations, they often do not comply. One resident in my constituency put it well. They said, and I quote, "When I spoke to a pedicab driver, he told me I'd better get used to it as it was about to get worse after lockdown. He went on to say, there's nothing the police can do about it. This nuisance is permitted as the operators are able to use a bylaw related to the power of their machines." This is truly staggering. I have, and others have, sustained evidence that many pedicab operators not only act contrary to basic health and safety standards, but do so knowing there is little power to hold them to account. I want to do everything I can to ensure we send a clear message that when we see examples of poor standards and behaviour in London, we will respond with strength. Intervention is necessary to create a licensing system to improve passenger safety, and particularly for those for women and girls, which is why I am delighted to be bringing this Friday my Pedicabs London Bill for its second reading in this House. And I have received powerful testimony from local authorities, businesses, residents for the transformative effect of the bill in London that this bill will have. And in fact, my bill is supported by members across the House from all parties, the Mayor of London, the Deputy Mayor for Transport, TfL, London councils like Westminster, Lambeth, Kensington, Chelsea, Camden, the Drivers' Pedicab Association, the Licensed Taxi Driver Association, the Royal National Institute of Blind People, the New West End Company, the Heart of London Business Alliance, and residents' associations and amenity societies up and down my constituency, the Soho Society, the Marylebone Association, the Marylebone Society, Covent Garden Community Association, the Knightsbridge Association, the Hyde Park Association, to name but a few. By enabling Transport for London to introduce a licensing system for pedicabs, the bill would allow them to set standards for operators, vehicles and drivers. They would check whether a pedicab driver had the right to work in the UK and allow licensed operators to provide a service to passengers that can be assured of their safety. And before I go, I want to just make sure that the Minister is aware that I was informed of a tourist being charged £380 for a journey from Leicester Square to Stratton Street, which is under a mile. They were charged £380. The Uber equivalent, I can't find it on the black cab obviously, but the Uber equivalent was £7. There's also that case of the amount of money that they are charging. So, finally, in conclusion, Mr Chairman, I know the Minister understands this. I know she understands the danger posed to women and girls in public spaces, and I do appreciate all the work she's done in her current role and her previous role. Do we really have to see someone seriously hurt, sexually assaulted, raped or killed in order to ensure that we get more safety for pedicabs? Do we really want to have to look a family in the face and say, actually, we could have regulated pedicabs? I look forward to the Minister's response.
The question is that this House has considered the safety of women and the regulation of pedicabs in London. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Bone, and what a pleasure it is to see you in the chair. And I'd like to start by thanking my honourable friend very sincerely for securing a debate on this incredibly important issue. And I'm very grateful for the contribution from the Honourable Lady for Vauxhall, who has also expressed her support. And this is truly a cross-party issue, and she herself has enumerated a very impressive collection of stakeholders, local community groups, politicians from across the board who have backed her dedicated campaign. And so I pay a huge tribute to her for her determination to propel this issue to the forefront of our attention. And can I also associate myself with the comments that she has made about the debt of gratitude that we all owe to the taxi driver in the tragic Liverpool terrorist attack. So I do feel as though I've come back home to the Department of Transport in responding to this debate, and it's a great pleasure to do so. And she references the fact that I did serve in that department, so I do have some familiarity with this particular issue and how important it is. And I'm also pleased to say that the government recognises her concerns that she's expressed so well about the safety of pedicabs and, of course, the impact that they can have in London, across the whole of the City of London, but not least in her constituency, being as it's a sort of centre of nighttime and tourist activity. And I agree with her as a woman who also travels on public transport around the City of London and my constituency, as all of us do, and also as a mother of a young woman as well. This is something that is not just something that we discuss in this Parliament, inside this building, but it's the lived experience that all of us have when we go outside. And I just want to pull out a line that she has used. She said, women have the right to feel safe in the same spaces as men. And I fully agree with her. So she has had a considerable campaign to raise awareness of the issue, and the government has listened. The government acknowledges it is not acceptable for the pedicab industry to be the only unregulated form of public transport in London. This is a glaring legal anomaly. She has amassed considerable evidence and some very powerful testimony. And so, therefore, we agree that regulating this industry is in the interest of safety and fairness for all road users, pedestrians and passengers. And I think she's also right to highlight the timing of this as we're coming out of lockdown, as we start to see tourists coming back to the businesses of the West End and other parts of London, and of course people going out and about and enjoying the nighttime economy, as I think we've discussed in this House just last week. This is an important part of the landscape that people will see when they come to our city, and we owe it to everybody to make this form of transport safe. So this is why the government supports her bill, which has its second reading this Friday, and I wish her a huge amount of good speed and good luck with this bill. Her bill, if passed, will enable Transport for London to introduce a licensing regime with enforcement powers and, among other clauses, introduce safety requirements. Now, I don't want to jinx fate, but we all know that sometimes things don't always go smoothly. In the Chamber, in the unfortunate event that her bill does not proceed beyond second reading, the government, regardless, remains committed to seeking opportunities to put forward our own legislation when Parliament... Of course, I'll give way.
And I thank the Minister for that response, and it's good to hear that the government will. So this is an issue that people have been calling for a number of times, and similar to my honourable friend's constituency, my constituency of Vauxhall, outside St Thomas's Hospital, where people have had, eye operations, elective surgery, been harassed by these pedicabs. We need a reform in the legislation here and now. No longer can Londoners wait. Will the Minister ensure that, she will discuss this with her colleagues in the Department for Transport to look at if, in the event that private members' bill doesn't get the next stage, that the Minister will be pushing this with her colleagues?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her point, and as someone who's been to that hospital myself, and I've experienced exactly those things that she's just described. And I can assure her that the noble lady for Norbiton, who is responsible for this issue in the Department for Transport, is looking closely at all options. And I know that she's met with my honourable friend to discuss future opportunities, should they be required, to put forward our own legislation as soon as parliamentary time permits. And she's right to say this is a long-running issue, and it is something the Department of Transport has dedicated attention to. So just on the broader issue of violence against women and girls, she has rightly raised the important issue of women's safety, and that's a topic that we have discussed many times in this chamber, Mr Bone. And so in my role as Home Office Minister, I think it is right that I recognise those points that she's raised, and as Safeguarding Minister, tackling violence against women and girls in all its forms and wherever it occurs is my top priority. So, of course, the Department for Transport, my former department, and when I was actually a minister there, it was a priority that I initiated. We worked closely through the issues that will be faced by vulnerable groups, including women, on the transport network. And we are keen to do more. So that's why, when I was the minister there, that's why I was delighted to appoint Laura Schoaf and Anne Shaw as the first Vogue transport champions in the Department for Transport, and they are working across campaign groups, across industry and across the whole of government to understand areas where we can improve safety on the UK's transport network. And by January next year, Mr Bone, they will be producing independent recommendations for the Department for Transport and the wider network on what best practice should be adopted to improve safety of the transport network for women and girls. And I think this is a really important theme because while I'm now in the Home Office and I obviously work with the police and other partners, what women and girls often say is where they feel the most unsafe is when they're taking public transport, when they're walking home from a night out or they're thinking about how they're going to get home, whether it's a tube or a bus or a train, and that's where those vulnerabilities exist. And that's why it's really important that I will be working closely with my former department to make sure that this happens. So on the Home Office work, my honourable friend has mentioned the cross-government tackling violence against women and girls strategy, and that's a really important piece of work to ensure that women and girls are safe everywhere. That was informed by a public call for evidence run by the Home Office, to which we received over 180,000 pieces of evidence, and that's one of the largest numbers of pieces of evidence that government has ever received for a public consultation. Quite an overwhelming response, just demonstrating the scale of the issue. It included testimony from victims, victim support organisations, frontline professionals and academics. And in the strategy that we've published, we have set forth a number of commitments from across government. And some of this work, forgive me, there's a number of strands to this strategy that we are pursuing, because obviously it's important that we ensure women and girls are safe, not only on the transport network, but across wider society. And if I can just highlight a couple of things that are particularly relevant to the issues that she's highlighted in the debate. We often think about pedicabs being used in the nighttime economy, and we know that that's a time when women and girls feel very vulnerable, and they are concerned about crimes such as harassment in public spaces, and in particular, that feeling and that perception of feeling safe or unsafe when they are walking home at night. So just to highlight a couple of commitments that the Home Office has already put in place. So we are piloting a £5 million Safety of Women at Night fund, and this fund is designed to prevent violence against women and girls in public spaces at night, including specifically in the nighttime economy. And that fund is focused on the prevention of those crimes to help women feel safe in public spaces at night, including within venues and on routes home. And another very important fund is an additional £25 million for the Safer Streets Fund. That fund has a particular focus on women and girls, and through that fund we're supporting a range of projects, including an initiative by the British Transport Police to develop a safer travel online platform across the rail network to make reporting easier, funding for the City of London Corporation to enable the delivery of 24 night hubs with St John ambulance medics and plainclothes police to respond to incidents and increase feelings of safety for women, and piloting a new online tool, Street Safe. That's a tool that was developed in collaboration with the National Police Chiefs Council, and it enables people, particularly women and girls, to pinpoint locations where they have felt unsafe and to identify the features of those locations that made them feel that way. In response to those identifications, police and crime commissioners and local policing teams can use that data to support local decision making. And this tool is being very widely welcomed and well used, Mr Bone. As of 12th of November, 6,895 reports have been made on this particular tool, and 72% of those reports are from women, which is no surprise. My honourable friend and other members will be aware that we have also recently appointed a national lead in the police force who is going to be leading on this critical issue of violence against women and girls. The Home Secretary has appointed Detective Chief Constable Maggie Blythe, and I've already met with her and discussing the work that she's going to do to lead on best practice across police forces across the country. And I do want to just close my remarks by encouraging anyone who feels unsafe while they are walking around the streets of my honourable friend's constituency or Vauxhall or indeed anywhere else in London, whether in a pedicab or anywhere, to please report to the police. This is a priority for this government. It is vital that women and girls can feel safe, whether they're going to work, whether they're meeting their friends, whether they're going out for a night out. That is a priority for the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister and for myself, and we will work tirelessly to drive the actions in the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, in society and on the public transport network. We are determined to leave no stone unturned to keep women and girls safe. Thank you, Mr Bone.
The question is that this House has considered the safety of women and the regulation of pedicabs in London. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. But the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order.